also is because looking at our conference today, when you look at it, we talk a lot about inclusivity, right? हम inclusive बनाना चाह रहे हैं, हम अपने education को the way we look at it, हम इसको balanced बनाना चाह रहे हैं. And अभी before I came here, किसी ने मुझसे ये सवाल पूछा कि आप इनसे ज़रूर पूछिएगा कि अगर हम इतने inclusive हैं और इतने balanced हैं, तो हमारे एग्जाम्स ईद के बीच में क्यों होते हैं? You know, कि इनके तो क्रिसमस के बीच में नहीं होते, तो हमारे क्यों ईद के बीच में होते हैं? उनको भी मैंने यही कहा कि it's also because our Eid is not fixed, right? It happens every year, and with such a huge organization across the world, it is not possible for them to make sure कि हमारी ईद को वो देख सकें. But उससे पहले, जिससे पहले हम शुरू करते हैं, let's flip it around और आप लोग मुझे बताएं, you can raise your hands, कि what kind of things would you like me to ask Mr. Tim? Is there anybody here who has when you came into this group, to this talk, did you say, I really want to find out about X, Y, or Z? Is there anything that you guys want me to ask him specifically? हम इतना छोटा सा ग्रुप पे आप खड़े हो के बोल भी लें तो I'll be able to hear you. जी प्लीज बताइए. Generative AI.
The role of generative AI in transforming the structure of assessment.
Right. So what again, like I'm hoping that he is on this chat very soon, because we are going to be talking about one of his papers that he co-authored, which is called The Future of Assessment. And it is all about navigating uncertainties through the lenses of anticipatory thinking. Uske andar AI ek subject hai, to wo I will talk to him about that. Anything else anybody specifically wants me to talk about? Ji.
Like using AI or chat GPT, like our students in IB, they were using chat GPT in their IAs, and we generally discourage them when they do so, because they want them to do their work themselves. And actually Turnitin has also developed this tool that it is detecting that how much percentage of chat GPT or AI has been used. So do you think in future we will allow all this and this all will be acceptable, or how will it affect the creativity or originality of the work that the students create, or like in their projects or in their papers?
So aapka question hai, I should ask him whether chat GPT or Bard or any such of these things, where they will affect the creativity in the students. Originality.
And another thing is that we all talk about these things like AI and all the digital like transformation, everything. But do you think in the next few years, or maybe in the 10 years, we will be shifting to something like you asked, you just shared about the assessment? Like we will be assessing everything that the student is doing in the class, or all the time they are doing like during they are on campus, or even
I mean, if you ask me personally, and of course Mr. Tim is the expert on it, so we all want his all I can say is that it is a changing landscape. It is, अगर हम समझेंगे कि ये चीज ऐसी चलती रहेगी, ऐसा नहीं है, ये चेंज तो होगी ही होगी.
सालों से हम ये सुन रहे हैं ना, लेकिन अभी भी सब कुछ करने के बाद इन द एंड वी हैव टू प्रिपेयर स्टूडेंट्स फॉर द टू सिट फॉर द एग्जाम एंड फॉर द ट्रेडिशनल असेसमेंट सिस्टम्स.
उसके अंदर पता है क्या, अगर हम एज टीचर्स ये सोच लें कि द बच्चा हैज टू प्रिपेयर देमसेल्व्स, हमें नहीं प्रिपेयर करना उनको, हमने उनको कंटेंट दे दी है, अब उन्होंने अपने आप को प्रिपेयर करना.
ऑफ कोर्स नॉट.
but we have
रिस्पांसिबिलिटी बढ़ जाती है
जितना उनको फ्रीडम देते हैं ऑफ दैट कंट्रोल. बिकॉज एट द एंड देखिए, मैं असेसमेंट्स के ऊपर तो बिकॉज we come to these conferences and we have all these discussions, but honestly जब तक colleges अपनी change नहीं करेंगे requirements, तो बच्चा क्या कर रहे हैं इनमें?
But don't you think such a big organization that we have already, like Beaconhouse is like all around the world and all that, why are we following Cambridge or these systems or IB? Why don't we have our own system, develop our own system, and then others can join us for assessment?
Well, I can't talk to that, but again, my personal opinion would be that they can Cambridge or the IB or any one of these, they have years and years of data. They have years and years of research.
But they also started someday, na?
I know, and I think we have.
Yeah.
We have started. We are making a lot of data-driven decisions now. We are gathering. We found new ways to gather data. अब हमारे पास भी, अब आप लोगों के पास बेयर आ गया होगा. अभी तक बेयर आ गया है ना. तो बेयर आप लोगों के पास आ गया ना, उसकी वजह से हमें बहुत डेटा मिल रहा है. सो एज लॉन्ग एज वी आर गोना स्टार्ट गेटिंग डेटा ऑल्सो, एंड तो हम भी शुरू करेंगे. बट I would say, we don't have enough expertise. Even if we put us all together, we still don't have enough expertise. जितने इन लोगों के पास हैं, the amount of researchers, PhDs, ये सारी चीजें, ये एक एंगल से देखने वाली तो चीज है ही नहीं ना. It's when I was looking at the study that Mr. Tim Oates conducted, they looked at, and I'll start with them right now. They talked about देखिए उनके steps देखें कि सबसे पहले तो उन्होंने कहा है कि 10 साल 10 years we will do research and awareness. ठीक है, and research and awareness, research is on one part of it, and then to create the awareness of that research, that's also there, no? Because I can sit on research and you won't even know about it. So the awareness for the research, so that's the number one step, right? Then the second step, which comes 10 years later, is adoption and transition. Because again, just to take you all through that transition is not just like I'll snap my fingers and all of a sudden there's a new assessment, let's start teaching differently. So that's another 10 years. Then they go into, after research and awareness, they go into pilot and development. So 5 years, so this has to be piloted somewhere. Then we go into adoption, transition. Then we go into expansion and collaboration. And then they will go into integration and enhancement. तो ये पूरा एक 20 साल की जर्नी है, 20 साल की जर्नी है जो हमें लेनी पड़ेगी. And yours is a good suggestion, but I think it will take a lot of time. Yes. So what we can do also is that we do have two fabulous members sitting in our audience from Cambridge. So अगर आपको Cambridge specific questions हैं, तो Miss Uzma भी यहाँ पे हैं और Miss ताबिंदा भी यहाँ पे हैं. we can change this discussion. अगर हमें लगे कि आ रहे हैं Mr. Tim कि नहीं हो रहा, नहीं हो सकेगा, little bit more time. Acha.
Since you said, they're mostly A-level teachers. So
yes, let's start. Let's get them on. Miss Uzma and Miss Tabinda, may I very informally ask you to come up on stage? I am so sorry. On the phone. So I'm going to start with asking, ये लें जी. Sorry, आप लोगों के पास ये mics हैं. This is totally impromptu. हमें पता है एजुकेशन में ऐसा होता है, क्लासरूम में हमें इम्प्रोवाइज करना होता है. प्लानिंग हमने की थी मगर टेक हमारे काम नहीं आई as usual. So can you please quickly introduce yourself so that they know who they're talking to, so they can ask their questions. Uzma, can we start with you, please?
I'm Uzma Yusuf. I'm the country director.
बस अपने
I'm the country director for Pakistan for Cambridge University Press and Assessment. So just to tell you a bit about what all we do in Pakistan, we work with schools.
आपका ऑन नहीं है. अब है? अब ऊपर से करें? नहीं.
Yeah, this one works. So, Cambridge has been in Pakistan before Pakistan was born, but we've been here forever. We work with schools. We are very proud partners of Beaconhouse, of course. And then overall in Pakistan, we work with around 800 schools, some private, some public, and in about 35 to 40 different cities of the country. We also have a press office, and we have Cambridge resources. We are also working on some government projects on national assessment and data, which are funded by the World Bank. I've been with Cambridge for a very long time. I won't tell you how long, because then you'll say maybe she can't answer questions. She's too archaic. So any policy questions, happy to answer, and over to Tabinda.
Thank you, Usma. मेरा नाम ताबिंदा मजहर है.
I would like to introduce myself as a teacher. So I have taught for many years, and I have now been working with Cambridge Assessment for 8 years as head of education Pakistan and Middle East North Africa regions. So professional development or education, जब मैं कहती हूँ, so most of the things that we do are teacher training, जो हम organize करते हैं. आप में से काफ़ी लोग familiar होंगे PDQs, जो professional development qualifications हैं. Beaconhouse has been our, the first one in Pakistan to offer that. So anything to do with education, training of school leaders, school teachers, that's what, we do. So that's the introduction. Aisha, over to you.
Excellent. So I will ask you this one thing that a lot of teachers ask me all the time, especially pertaining to Cambridge, is that just because we change the name from tests to assessments, test to phir bhi test hai. So what has Cambridge, tell us how Cambridge has evolved the way it looks at assessments over the last 20-25 years.
So, Aisha, that's a really good question. लेकिन ये जो Cambridge के assessments हैं, each of the Cambridge curriculums changes over 6 years. So, हर चीज़ साथ-साथ constantly change होती रहती है. You might call it O levels, but it does not continue to be the same O levels that your parents might have taken or you might have taken. It's completely different. नाम वही होता है. And we have Europe's largest research lab in assessment. So we're constantly looking at how we put papers together, how we assess, and not just assess. अगर हम पाकिस्तान में थोड़ी सी narrow definition होती है assessment की, उसका मतलब ये होता है कि हमने paper set किए और paper check किए. हमारे लिए assessment का उतना ही integral part teaching and learning है.
बिल्कुल.
तो वो आप evolve करते हैं साथ-साथ to make sure that the classroom teaching reflects better what we want to teach. So that, as you know, जैसे आपको ताबिंदा बता रही थी, we've got a whole professional development team here. पिछले 20 सालों में जो हमने evolve किया है, we work far more closely with schools now. The remit goes far beyond, exam taking and testing.
That's right.
We have an early years program, primary, upper secondary, and of course the O levels and A levels. Then we have professional development qualifications and teaching. So assessment तो evolve होती है, लेकिन उससे ज़्यादा important ये जो सारे control factors हैं उनको करना. Lots of subjects have coursework, applied content, but हमें लगता है हम यही बात कल भी कर रहे थे कि we need to support you more in being able to assess the non-exam paper types of assessment.
And that's very important, because what I, again, for the last 25 years have been hearing in Pakistan is that we've cracked the code. Yeah, we've cracked the code. We've cracked the code on O levels. We can get 8 A's and 8 A stars and blah, blah, blah. But it goes back to the teachers. It goes back to the educators, that are you there solely so that child who was, if he's going to rote memorize something and get an A star, is that why you came into education?
Aisha, I want to add 2 examples to what you and Uzma have talked about. So, हम change की बात कर रहे थे कि क्या कुछ change हुआ या कुछ हुआ भी है कि नहीं. Yes, of course, syllabus वही है. जैसे उस्मा ने बताया, there is a content change. आप में से कितने लोग O level sciences पढ़ाते हैं? Okay, so आपको पता होगा physics, chemistry, biology, maths, complete change हुआ, and that change, Aisha, जो मुझे लगता है the most important is that has been made and revised on the feedback that we collected with the help of the teachers, and mostly Pakistan teachers, because we did a lot of focus group discussions. Another change that I'm really proud of is that, yes, Cambridge is known for assessments and end of the year summative assessment, but which we need if we live in a real world, and especially after the advent of AI, chat GPT, हम सबको पता है कि paper pencil test, जिसको हम जितना मर्जी बोलें, that still the authenticity and validity is still, lies in that in some ways. So जो हमने अपनी training में change लाए हैं, वो आप focus on assessment पे, अब 2 दिन की एक हमारी training होती है, it's no more the extension training. And when we say assessment, it's not just summative assessments के marking scheme क्या है, 2 number देने हैं के 4. There is a whole focus on formative assessment, जो अभी उज़मा कह रही थी कि आप जब पढ़ा रहे हैं, what kind of feedback do you need to give to the student over those 2 years or that 1 year, कि आपको end में सिर्फ testing, teaching to the test ना हो. So I think these are 2 examples of how we have evolved also and started looking at formative assessment, कि good work लिख देना या thumbs up कर देना is no feedback. So the value of feedback is we've been highlighting much more.
So these are points of reflection for you teachers, because the onus is on you as much as it is on Cambridge? I'm sorry, is no? It's okay. All right. So now again, I want to take the conversation beyond just Cambridge and assessments, and I want to talk about the future of assessments. And I'm going to ask you guys all the questions that I was supposed to ask Tim, and inshallah, and inshallah, he will join us at some point. So they talk about Cambridge talks about in the future of assessment AI tutors and very personalized learning. Have you guys looked at those facets of assessments?
So, for our English language side, we also have Cambridge English. We have a test called Lingua Skills.
Okay.
We've taken more than 1 million tests, and that's where we use AI a lot. We will
Can you
use
tell us how you use AI in that?
it's about it's adaptive testing,
Okay.
and it's a language test that you can take anywhere. You can take it at home and so on. But as far as our own summative assessments and high stake assessments are concerned, we are going to take a very considered approach. And tutoring is different from the test and how you use technology in that. So that's our professional development being supported and augmented by the use of AI.
Okay. So I think Miss Sarah is walking towards us. Wow. Oh, okay. Same.
Hi,
Tim?
can you hear me okay?
Tim, are you being? Tim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. That's absolutely fine.
All right. So let me introduce Tim. Thank you, Tim, for joining us. Tim Oates is the Director of Assessment, Research and Development for Cambridge University Press and Assessment. Tim Oates is the Group Director of Assessment. He is focusing on national and international research and measurement. In 2010, he published Could Do Better, which laid down the principles for the review of the National Curriculum of England. He was also the chair and expert panel for review of the National Curriculum of England. Emerging from this review, oh, we can see him now. Excellent. Emerging from this review, subsequent research on quality and functions of textbooks and other resource has been taken up around the world. Tim, welcome to our group. I am going to try to see if I can sit on that side just so that I can.
Thank you very much indeed for that very kind introduction. I think it's really important to think really hard now about the future of assessment. And why? Because there are so many voices talking about what assessment will be like in 5 years, 10 years' time. Some of those voices don't understand assessment, and some of the voices don't understand education. So we have to be quite cautious, and I'm going to run through the things that we need to take into account in thinking about what assessment should be like in 5 years and 10 years' time. And it is a should. I mean, we have control of it. And so I just want to outline how we are thinking about it. Some people say, well, technology shouldn't just be about doing what we do now, because digital assessment offers so many unusual and new and exciting things. Well, let's just stop and think. A lot of the research that we are looking at globally says that schools are not very digitally ready, and that there are really practical issues in terms of electrical supply, number of devices, setting up exam sessions. And these really practical matters are extremely important. So in some ways, if we are just able to do what we do now, but support it digitally, we will have achieved an awful lot. We will have got the groundwork done. We will have got the practical things in place, which will then enable us to develop very exciting new approaches. So we need to bear that in mind. Sometimes doing quite modest things actually gets us a long way in terms of our practical preparation. We can already think quite radically about assessment, and we have been for 20 years. We've been thinking about how to blend assessment and learning. what kind of feedback we should give to young people, to parents, what kind of information and data helps teachers and schools do a better job, to reflect on what they're doing, how we can improve equity and attainment. We were doing those things even before we were thinking about how they could be digitally supported. And that thinking was very sound. That thinking is very good. It looks at the nature of the feedback that we should be given, how we can make teachers use the data from assessment more effectively in terms of supporting learners, how receptive the students and young people are to different sorts of feedback. Now, all those things we need to think through, underpin with evidence, and take forward into our thinking about how the digital technology available to us can improve assessment and learning. We mustn't forget the principles of good assessment. We mustn't forget about utility, validity, and reliability. Those principles are fundamental. And we mustn't forget that questions, really good questions, lie at the heart of sound assessment and sound learning. And of course, we should take all of that thinking through into the digital world. I'll finish just by saying that we need to think about who is devising ed tech. We need to think about the structure of the market because it's flooded with applications. Some of them good, some of them not so good. Some of them really quite bad. They don't accord with the principles of good assessment and good learning, which we have established with huge effort over the last 20 years. So we need to think about the structure of that market. How do we discriminate between good ed tech and poor ed tech? And it's very important to think about the assessment knowledge of the people developing this technology. Do they know about assessment? Do they know about learning? And if the answer is yes, if the answer is they're really tapping into the best research on assessment of learning in development of their digital applications, then that's a good thing. So I'll finish there.
Thank you so much for that, Tim. I was doing a little bit of research and saying what I wanted to ask in our context here in Pakistan. This conference that we're having, it's called Guardians of the Future, an inclusive, expressive, unknown, peaceful, and balanced future. I wanted to touch upon the inclusive and balance and the unknown part of it. And whilst I was doing that, I read your paper that you co-authored, I believe, The Futures of Assessment, Navigating Uncertainties Through the Lenses of Anticipatory Thinking. And then I looked at one of your introductions says that the purpose of future thinking is not to predict the future, but to anticipate and understand likely scenarios. And before you joined us, this is something we were talking with the audience about, and they wanted to know, what is the future? Can we predict it? Will AI take over everything? What will happen? And I was telling them that I wanted to talk to you about the drivers of change or drivers for change that you have identified in that paper, which are AI tutors, personalized learning, augmented, virtual, and a hybrid tech, humans flourishing and well-being, climate change, assessment, organizations themselves. Can you touch upon? I mean, I know it's a vast paper. I couldn't read it entirely, but I've started it. But could you touch upon the drivers for change and some of what you anticipate the future to look like in terms of assessment?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it reflects a real concern of the people I know. And Uzma really touched on this. We in Cambridge we have developed techniques and approaches to making sure that we can manage the emergence of future education. That it doesn't catch us by surprise. That it's wrong for people to say, oh, this is inevitable and that is inevitable. For sure, there are things that are pushing us, drivers, population increase, climate stresses. Of course they are, and we need to respond to them. But we have more agency than we imagine in the educational space. It's very important that we use international comparisons to understand what's possible. Because very often when you look around the world, you can see that countries are already doing things that have improved equity and attainment. In England, for example, we've driven very, very hard on early reading, and it's really paid off. We informed our drive on mathematics by collaborative work with Shanghai and with Singapore, and that materially raised our mathematics attainment. There was nothing kind of inevitable or external to that. We deliberately did it, and it has tangibly raised educational standards. So my first message is to say the future is far more in our hands than we imagine. And when we have people like Richard Kalata standing up and saying, it's inevitable that we get rid of paper textbooks, they'll be gone in 10 years. Well, that doesn't accommodate the fact that Sweden has carefully considered the evidence and is reinvesting in paper textbooks because they are supportive of teachers, they're effective for learners, and they help parents understand the content that a child is moving through. Now, it sounds like a backward step, but it isn't, because they're using paper-based textbooks to drive through very innovative pedagogy, to improve equity and attainment. Now, let's just think about how we could innovate in the digital space in assessment and move forward using everything we know about good science. Well, assessment, in a sense, is just good questions. It's so we can begin to collate all the good questions that we've asked in examinations before, and we won't use again. But they were good questions, and they'll be useful in pedagogy. So we can use digital technology to collate and curate those questions and feed them back into learning. And that's what Isaac Physics does from Cambridge. We can use technology to strengthen teacher assessment using new paradigms like comparative judgment. Not saying, teacher assessment is contaminated by bias. We can never use it. But actually using digital technology to support teachers' assessment through the use of exemplars, to communicate standards, and to tie communities of teachers together digitally, and then monitor the nature of the judgments that they're making. No, and do all that in the context of discussion between teachers, schools, the state, technology developers, educationalists, and assessment specialists. So what the report, which I only wrote the introduction. There were very, very good people
Yes.
who, like Sarah Hughes and colleagues, who managed the production of the report, and I contributed to its content. What the report says is the future is far more in our hands than we imagine, and we need to take all of these things, the principles of assessment, principles of good pedagogy into account, put together good groups of technologists and educationalists, and then we will have trustworthy technology. But only when we've laid the practical ground, when we've completed the practical groundwork in schools. I hope that's helpful and reassuring.
Thank you so much, Tim. And I'm going to segue right there. You said it. Because we are a group of teachers and educators sitting in this room, I think every generation and every space, every year, we come up with buzzwords. And right now, tech and AI and all of this is really disrupting education. But you teachers, where you are sitting, you have it, just like Tim is saying, it's all in your hands right now. The content is in your hands. It does not matter what kind of assessment it is, because assessment is the last part of education, right? The way we look at it, if you want to be we want to be inclusive, and look at our country right now and look at other countries where people do not have access to tech. And if we're going to go rushing into this tech world, we are leaving behind a lot of people as well. So to keep it equitable, I think it's very important to keep these kind of things in check and not try to run away with it. Before Tim joined us, I was talking about the timeline that was created, which is they wanted to go into research from 2025, piloting and development in 2030, adoption and transition by 2035, expansion and collaboration by 2040. I think that's when we'll come into the picture. And 2040 is when the integration and enhancement will happen. I wanted to go back and just ask you, in your initial stages, what do you expect, or rather, the research to show us? What is the future of assessment? What does research tell us today in 2023?
So you mentioned AI, and you mentioned inequalities associated with access to technology, and I will just deal with those before giving my view on what the future of assessment will be. I've seen AI used brilliantly, the large language models, in classrooms. And let me just illustrate. I want kids to understand glaciation. Okay, it's quite a hard idea that these rivers of ice move slowly and grind mountains to dust and move material from one place to another. When you look at them, it doesn't look as though they're moving. So you can actually ask a class of young kids, right, you have 4 minutes to search about glaciation using AI. See what it says. Interestingly, they'll ask different questions. They'll come up with different things. And I've seen this in classrooms. Then you have a class discussion. What did you find? Is that correct? Is it wrong? Has the AI hallucinated and got things wrong? And it's using it as a rich resource. It's problematic, of course, when kids pass off work which has been created by AI as their own. That is a problem, and we're dealing with that. But AI is a great tool, and it can be used richly, but in the context of sound pedagogy. Well, we know from what happened with lockdowns because of COVID around the world, when kids were unable to go to school, that there's incredibly uneven access to ed tech. And it runs deeper than that. It's the different social and cognitive processes which happen when you have children simply using online resources to learn. Some kids just switch off. They're there, but they don't learn in the same way. And we have to take these cognitive processes into account. What happened when we said, oh, it's okay, kids can just learn remotely, is that gaps opened up, even when they had access to technology and to broadband. So we need to bear that in mind. And I know Saarinen's work in Finland actually showed that even in the Finnish context, before COVID, that the greater the use of online learning in schools, the greater the gaps that were opening up. So we know it's not just about using ed tech to support learning in an unsystematic way, because that will open up gaps. So I'll finish on the future of assessment. Yeah, I can see us still using tests. I can still see us using exams, because we do want to ask kids questions about what they have learned, the sum total of what they've learned, and whether they remember it. Yeah, you are what you remember. It's part of your identity. So we need to continue to do that. And we can use technology to do that. We do that with doctors when they're training. But we can use AI to enrich classroom discussion, to provide formative feedback, to ensure that we have high quality information from learning, to really drive high quality pedagogy and close those gaps. That will be about using digital technology to improve the quality of teacher assessment, to increase the volume of rich questions available to everyone, to encourage young people and parents to use the feedback to improve their own learning. So I see digitally enhanced learning permeating education when we have the technology platform there for all and access for all, and it enriching both formative and summative assessment, improving the quality of summative assessment through adaptive assessment and so on, and assessment when ready, if appropriate, and improving the quality of teacher assessment so that we can begin to trust it more, and improving the richness of learning. What Randy Bennett said, intertwining assessment into every instance of instruction. That's my view of the future.
Thank you, Tim. And I was discussing this with someone yesterday, and I see, because we're at the last 9 minutes of our discussion, I have some questions from the audience as well. Somebody asked me yesterday that what you're talking about in terms of assessment, what about the well-being of students? That we feel that at age 16, when the human child body is going through so many changes. It's the most crucial time of their adolescence. And that's the time when they have to sit for these pressure taking exams. Why can't this timeline move? Why does it have to coincide? And that is, it got me thinking that why do we test these very crucial O levels at a time when they're 16 years old, and then A levels when they're 18 years old? It is a time when they're, and especially in the world today, where children are seeing turmoil all around them, is that a time to put pressure on them? And I have right in front of me a question that says, what advice do you have for students to maintain a healthy balance between academic performance and overall well-being, especially considering the pressures of associated with exams?
Yeah, we're very concerned about this, and we've just set up a special interest group in the Association of Educational Assessment for Europe, a special interest group on what we call holistic assessment, looking at the well-being of young people as well as their academic and cognitive attainment. But I can pull very quickly threads together from everything that I have said. An assessment is not stressful if you know the things that answers to the questions you're being asked, or the tasks that you're being given. It's stressful if you don't know the stuff. That's really important. Now, adaptive assessment can help us, because adaptive assessment, particularly digitally supported, can begin to adapt the test to the level of attainment of the learner and feed them questions which are neither too hard that they can't possibly get, or questions that are too easy which are not really probing their understanding. So adaptive assessment is useful, and we're developing models here, and it will be present in future assessment.
I wish you could have seen the faces of all our teachers here. They all smiled when you said assessments are not supposed to be stressful. And I'm smiling back at them. But he's absolutely right. They're not supposed to be stressful. If you teach correctly, and if you can ensure that the child has taken from it what they need to, they shouldn't be stressful.
It's really important. And for example, I interviewed a whole group of German students a while ago in German schools, and the majority of them said they looked forward to exams because it was an opportunity to demonstrate what they knew, which I think is the right kind. And they weren't stressed by it. They also had teacher grades to fall back on if they didn't do well in the exam, and they could also put themselves forward if they felt that the exam didn't demonstrate what they knew. They could then put themselves forward for being assessed orally by a group of teachers. Again, this is all very interesting in terms of what the future assessment might look like. But I will also emphasize that we can directly assess well-being more, and there are approaches to really supporting kids well, and we find those kind of approaches in countries where teachers meet each term to discuss how each and every child is progressing. So, and sometimes that also uses formal tests. They use tests to actually probe the well-being of kids. These tests are well developed by assessment agencies, and instead of asking questions about discipline content, it's actually asking them about their attitudes to learning, about what's happening in their lives, and this provides very valuable information for teachers. And we, as Usman knows, we develop and use those forms of tests as well. They can be really, really important for educators.
It's funny that you gave the example of Germany, because I want to share with the audience that when I was a child, I did go to school in Germany, and I used to get very excited when I had assessments, because I wanted to test myself and see where I stood, what I knew, what I had learned, and I was very excited. But at that time, everybody used to call me a nerd, because then that was what you were. If you were excited about assessments, therefore you were a nerd. So now, and it's how teachers now approach the well-being of a child and champion those children, instead of saying that, you're a nerd and therefore you are excited about exams. But I wonder if there is data based on culture, and in Asia is a very, very competitive and data-driven, exam-driven continent. Does that have an impact on the overall teaching and learning, which continent you live in?
Yes, the country to really keep an eye on, I think, in terms of that, and actually meets a lot of the kind of requirements that you were just laying down for being sensitive to culture, is Singapore. Singapore has many ethnic groups and people with different linguistic backgrounds, and they've increasingly worried about the stress which arises from some of their assessments, particularly the primary school leaving examination, which is taken by kids at the end of primary school and determines which route they go into at the age of 10 or 11. And it's such a critical assessment that test preparation has really stressed out young kids and their parents in Singapore, and they're actively dealing with that.
Yeah.
What's also interesting about Singapore is that we've used the pedagogic approaches associated with a more Confucian Asian style of thinking and pedagogy in England. Why? Because that Confucian model, which permeates the education of Singapore and places like Shanghai, says any child can achieve anything depending on the effort that they put into learning it. That's really important, that we begin to see children in terms of the effort they put into learning instead of some underlying model of ability. This kid is intelligent and bright and will progress, and this child is dull and will never learn anything. You know, that's the nice thing about Asian pedagogy is it moves beyond those crude and inappropriate assumptions. I do want to say that learning is hard, though. Learning challenges our everyday experience. Most of the things that we want kids to learn when they go to school are counterintuitive and run counter to their everyday experience. That's intrinsically stressful. And we want them to get used to their ideas being challenged, to not just have what they know already be recognized, but to build on it, to shift it in line with scientific thinking, in line with what we now know about cognition and about culture. So that level of stress is always going to be present in education. We need to be concerned about kids' well-being, but know they're going to constantly have to challenge their own ideas and have their own ideas challenged by others.
We have one question here, and I think this is going to be the last question because I see my timer is telling me I have 1 minute and 2 seconds. 1 minute and 2 seconds left. This is a practical question that our teachers are asking. This is from the audience. What are some critical factors when designing assessments that accommodate diverse learning styles and abilities in the classroom? I'm sorry, Tim, I know this can be answered in 1 minute, but can you try to answer it? Some of the critical factors
Yes,
when designing assessments to accommodate diverse learning styles and abilities.
Yeah, I can, and I can answer it very quickly. We faced this when we revised our national curriculum in 2010, and it was implemented in 2014, and it has resulted in an improvement in standards in our country, breaking a long period of an inability to shift attainment and equity. So it has worked. Our national curriculum is extremely sparse. It will list things that kids need to know, like conservation of mass or the use of metaphor in poetry, but it doesn't say how you do it. We leave that to schools because teachers are best at knowing the way in which each individual kid in their class should approach these hard and challenging ideas. But we know and have clarity about what it is that we want all the kids to learn on this occasion. And that's the secret to it. To be very clear about the outcome, to have very clearly and well stated outcomes, usually in the form of a national curriculum, and know that it is going to be for the school to make the decision about how each child should approach the learning of that. But we know that kids are in groups, and so we can use social learning and the collective context of the school so that each child can think about how other children are approaching the idea under the management of the teacher And it's that approach which we know can improve equity and raise attainment for all. But this clarity about what we want each child to learn on this occasion is absolutely at the heart of it.
Thank you so much, Tim. We appreciate you taking the time to meet with us, and I apologize for the earlier disconnect. Technology is known to fail us from time to time, and it is Murphy's Law, so it does happen. But thank you so much. Audience, please give him a round of applause.
And thank you very much indeed, Tim.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aisha Kasuri. This was an amazing session, respected audience. If you like the session, please give your feedback on the mobile app. Thank you.
Hello? Can anybody hear me? Hello? Hello, I'm Matt Glanville from the IB. I have no idea what to say, but I'll keep talking anyway. Thank you.
It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you to the 16th edition of School of Tomorrow events, Guardians of the Future, Shaping Tomorrow with Generative AI. The non-profit School of Tomorrow event series was launched by Beaconhouse in year 2000 to engage global communities in conversations that shape the future of schools and societies. I would like to thank Google for Education and their partner Tech Valley, the lead sponsor for School of Tomorrow 2023, and our titanium sponsor, United Bank Limited. Other key sponsors include My Backpack, MK Books International, Allied Bank Limited, Franklin Covey, Habib Bank Limited, Watheen, and Interwood. We also thank our School of Tomorrow supporters, including Paramount Books, Nestle Pure Life, who have contributed to this year's event. My name is Muhammad Qasim, and I am an IGCSE and A-levels mathematics teacher at Beaconhouse, Potoha campus, Islamabad. Please take a moment to note these important housekeeping points. Please ensure your cell phones are on silent. In case of an emergency, the exit point is located at the back of this hall. You may use the staircase opposite to this hall. In case if it is blocked or packed, you may use the one on the right-hand side. Always stay calm and follow directions. Please use the SOT app to scan the QR code for session question answer and feedback. Share your thoughts on social media using the hashtags hashtag Guardians of the Future and hashtag SOT2023. If you need assistance, our ushers are here to help. For questions, please either use the flashcards provided by the ushers or the mobile app. The panel discussion will last for 45 minutes, followed by 15 minutes for question and answers. Now, I would like to invite the moderator of the session, Ms. Kawal Malik, on the stage and introduce the panelists. Ms. Kawal is the Deputy General Manager Education Operations at Beaconhouse. With over 15 years of education experience, she has held many leadership roles at the leading project-based learning school, TNS Beaconhouse. She is a Cambridge Program Leader for Educational Leadership. Ms. Kawal Malik.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's feeling refreshed at the end of the three-day conference. I would like for you to give us a round of applause as the last session. I think we deserve that. Thank you. Also, we need to make sure that you're all awake and not asleep by now. Anyway, let's begin. Welcome to the 16th edition of SOT events, Guardians of the Future, Shaping Tomorrow with Generative AI. As the moderator of today's panel discussion, I'm delighted to welcome you all. As you can see, this panel, you can see the profiles. We have wonderful people, knowledgeable and experts in their fields who will be talking to us about ownership in the age of AI. I'm going to introduce them to you so we know who they are. Our first panelist is Mr. Andrew Coombe. He is the Managing Director of Oxford AQA. His expertise and experience include leading global teams at Cambridge Assessment International in the Middle East, South Asia, East Asia, and Europe. He is an alumnus of Oxford and Cambridge universities. Let's welcome Mr. Andrew Coombe. Then with him, we have Mr. Wasim Ajmal Chaudhry. Mr. Wasim Ajmal Chaudhry is the Federal Secretary of Education and Professional Training. With over 25 years in civil service, he also served as CEO of Saaf Pani Company. He was also the National Project Director of a 200 million USD World Bank initiative for COVID-19 education response. Let's welcome Mr. Wasim Ajmal Chaudhry. Next to Mr. Chaudhry, we have Mr. Monis Rahman. Monis Rahman is currently the CEO at Dukaan, spearheading the development of a digital commerce ecosystem of MSME. He is also the force behind 3 venture-backed startups, including Pakistan's largest employment and financial wellness platform, Rosie, and the leading digital lending fintech Finja. Mr. Monis, welcome to the panel. We are also joined by an online panelist, Dr. Matthew Glanville. Dr. Matthew Glanville is the Director of Assessment at the International Baccalaureate since June 2023, following years of dedicated service within the IB's assessment team. His professional journey includes various roles in the UK, such as QCDA and Ofcall. Starting as a mathematics teacher, Dr. Glanville later led research teams in regional and vocational skills agency. Welcome, Dr. Glanville.
Thank you.
And last but not the least, I'm sure most of you already know our AI avatar panelist, Nadia. Nadia, ladies and gentlemen, is our digital panelist. For the first time in Pakistan, SOT Events presents AI avatars who will participate in this discussion. Nadia always tells us that she will not give any opinions because her responses are going to be factual and text-based. So let's see how she responds to us today. Let's welcome Nadia. And let me just test her out whether she is awake and not fallen asleep. Nadia, can you introduce yourself? Nadia, are you with us? That's okay. I think we're going to give her some time to see how she would like to respond or not. We'll come back to you, Nadia.
Hello, Nadia. It's a pleasure to have another Nadia joining the conversation. Yes, I am here with you. How can I assist you today? Is there something specific you would like to discuss or ask about?
Can you introduce yourself, Nadia? Okay, she doesn't like.
Of course, Nadia. As an AI avatar panelist for School of Tomorrow events, I'm here to engage in conversations, answer questions, and provide insights on various topics. I'm designed to assist and interact with users like you. How can I help you today?
So Nadia, if you could respond to all our questions in the panel, I think that would be wonderful. Thank you for your introduction. Now let's move on to our panel discussion today. We all know that in today's world of generative AI, the way we think about who owns and gets credit for content is changing. A lot of people are taking support from different AI supported platforms like ChatGPT, Bard. And the question remains, who owns the content when we take support from these platforms? Now, on the screen, you can see we have a human headmaster of Cottesmore High School, and then we have next to him Miss Abigail Bailey, who is the AI head teacher recently appointed by the school. And the human headmaster, Tom Rogerson, said that he's using the robot to give him advice on issues ranging from how to support fellow staff members in helping students with ADHD and, most importantly, writing school policies. So the question remains, when Abigail writes the school policies, who will have the ownership? And of course, we'll delve deeper. Now, I would request my esteemed panelists to let's start with an opening statement about our topic of discussion, that is navigating originality and ownership in generative AI. Mr. Andrew Coombe, in your experience, in extensive experience in the field of education and assessment, if you could give us your thoughts in an opening statement about how do we navigate originality and ownership in generative AI?
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me, everyone? Yeah. I guess I would start by just reflecting on what AI is and what it can help to do for us. And A colleague of mine at Oxford just says, well, AI, it's just maths. It's just maths. It's just a tool. And if you think of it as a tool, it's a tool that will be very helpful, that can do things, many more things than we've been able to do as humans. It can do them much faster, and it can probably do them much more cost effectively. So it's capable of doing a lot more administrative tasks. But if you think about the outputs, if you take an uncritical view, if you just take what an AI tool produces for you, then I don't think you can claim any ownership of that. But I don't think that's what's happening in most cases, because what you tend to find is that AI is a tool. It helps you. It can perhaps create a first draft. It can help come up with prompts. It can help with your inspiration and creativity, perhaps. It can inspire that. But I think I think we all need to view it as just that, as something to start with, that we can then build on, and we can create our own originality using inputs from that tool. And if you think about it, if you think about, I don't know, artists or musicians, they have always in the past been influenced by other things that they have seen around them, by music that's gone before from different composers. And just because they've used those things as inspiration, it doesn't mean that their outputs are not their own. And I think AI is the same. If it's used as a tool to inspire and as a starting point, then I think people can use it and still claim ownership. That's a view.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I completely agree with you. We do keep inspiration from the content that is already around us. And I think that is what AI does, uses the database that is being input by humans most of the time. Great. Thank you so much. Now, coming to you, Mr. Wasim Ajmal Chaudhry, you are the Federal Secretary of Education. In your current role, how do you see AI changing or impacting originality and ownership, especially in our context in Pakistan?
Thank you very much, Kamal. And indeed, it's been a pleasure coming here and meeting professionals and other stakeholders. AI domain has really, posed very severe, serious challenges in the domain of policy making and in the way education as a whole is being imparted to the children. Because it's not the purpose of education is not only to give certifications or degrees to the boys and girls and they come out and perform certain defined roles in economy and certain money. We all know that in a society for a child to become a responsible citizen in order to promote peace, harmony, tolerance, and having kind of inclination for democratic and human values. All these things are important, if at all, even if we don't consider other things like sports or community work, etc. So, keeping all that in mind, AI, which can facilitate a lot to the school management as well as other important areas to the policy managers as well as to school managers. But then there are this entire ecosystem has to be seen in the context whether it really enables the learners or whether it really enables the children to become more responsible, more kind of tolerant, and more pluralistic approach in his approach towards life. Because we all know that using AI tools, whereby they might have, that kind of data or algorithms inbuilt into that, which could be having many kinds of biases. After all these would be developed not by the developing world or countries like us. These tools will be developed by someone from the West, someone from the developed world, which we call, and their biases could obviously influence our kids. We are already, that doesn't mean that we need to be afraid of that, but the only thing is that how cognizant we are, how do we actually manage those kinds of things. I was recently seeing that debate about one of the AI tool where and when it was asked that whether Israelis have the kind of citizens' rights and what kind of Palestinians rights they have. So the answer was very clear in terms of biases. So that is just one area whereby we have to be very careful. And similarly, it's not only about AI, but in fact towards all other kinds of tech interventions, whereby we have to see whether they really support the overall objectives of education, particularly in a country like us, and also whether they really support the children and the school management, including teachers, to enhance learning objectives.
So, sir, no, thank you so much for your response. And I do agree with you that in our context, of course, in the public sector, just having that awareness that the kind of impact AI could have in terms of how students produce their work would be the first step for us. Because in our public sector, of course, we are not actually there. I know you have been part of many initiatives in terms of bringing in a lot of technology in the public sector during COVID. But even with people like you with your vision, we still have a long way to go. So I do agree that having that understanding as a first step is extremely important, and having that understanding of the certain challenges that are posed. So thank you so much. Now, Monis, coming to you. I know your role is very different from what than the rest of the gentlemen here. They're purely educationists, and that sector, you are a digital entrepreneur, and people and students come to you with ideas all the time. How do you see AI impacting ideas when it comes to entrepreneurship?
So I think first important for all of us to understand, AI has been around for a very long time. AI is not new. I think what is new and this sort of interest in AI that has skyrocketed has come over the last year when ChatGPT launched commercially. It's been about a year. It's not a lot of time, but already it's transformed the way we're doing things. And the power of AI we're seeing has been exponentially more powerful month on month. What AI couldn't do a month ago, it can do today. And what AI can't do today, it can do tomorrow because of the way the model learns. And I want to talk about that a little bit prior to going into your question, because it's important to understand that, this GPT, this generative AI wave that's come, what it's doing is it is basically indexing the universe of information that's already available out there. There's lots of data out there on Google and websites and inside databases. And what it does is it takes all of that information, it memorizes it, and creates a mathematical model that predicts based on what you type. And it doesn't even know what it's going to say, because every time it makes a prediction, it jumps to make another prediction and another prediction. So it's a statistical generated content, which ends up making a lot of sense because the algorithm is very powerful. And the reason I'm saying this is because it's important to understand that if somebody takes content that was generated by ChatGPT, they aren't violating a copyright of ChatGPT, because ChatGPT doesn't own that content. In fact, ChatGPT won't be able to even tell you where it got the content from, and it's certainly from more than one place. So when people take content from these AI engines and reproduce them, they're not really stealing anybody's copyright. It's created. I think the problem is when they take credit for it on their own and they didn't do it. And I think this is going to be a moot point going forward because it's all very new. We're struggling with how to deal with it. But what it points to is that the skills of today and tomorrow are changing dramatically. We used to really emphasize the importance of handwriting for young kids, make sure it's very neat in the lines. Kids would win competitions for handwriting. But now we know that if my child has the best handwriting in the world, the correlation to that and future success is not very strong. And likewise, the ability to put things together, which are now readily available through AI models, and increasingly so, are probably not the skills that we want to emphasize for our kids. Coming back to how this impacts the startup landscape, it's actually very revolutionary. Now, there's a recent paper that was produced by Google saying that AI cannot give anything novel. It simply takes information it has and regurgitates it and gives it in various forms. But the ability to reason based on that information and create new novel ideas is not yet there as a part of AI. So entrepreneurs, can't use AI to invent something that's never been invented before and say, wow. It's more enhancement of, how productive they are. But one thing that's very important to note is that because our ecosystem lacks certain skills due to the education crisis we have in our country, AI ends up being a great equalizer.
Yes.
So if you have entrepreneurs from a remote area of the country whose English skills aren't that strong, who can't communicate that well, all of a sudden AI has given them an edge. There are software programmers who are using AIs to code. There are individuals who are building user interfaces by using AI to translate websites and explain it to them in Roman Urdu. And this is what's phenomenal, is now AI has learned Roman Urdu. It's learned it. Nobody sat there and tried to teach it Urdu. It just ate up all the information and it learned. It's magical, right? So now imagine on WhatsApp, which your driver, your cook, and a rickshaw driver have, being able to automate and giving digital services powered by AI in Roman Urdu. This is a game changer. This allows you to access a whole group of people that were excluded. So I think it's a great advantage. And the last thing I'll just want to say, is the Biden administration recently passed this executive order. This just happened. Executive order. It means it didn't go through Congress and have a vote and sign into law. The president said, here's an executive order, here's how it is. And it was sent to most of the tech platforms. And what this executive order said is if you are a tech platform building AI and you are using more than 10 billion parameters, and parameters is the amount of information you're feeding the AI with. If you have 10 billion parameters, it's a large-scale model which can get dangerous in the eyes of the administration. You have to be licensed. You have to report what you're doing, and you have to be audited. And it also said that AI companies should embed a digital fingerprint, a footprint, so that you can detect what's going on. Because, make no mistake, because of the random nature of AI, it is indistinguishable. And anybody saying, well, you can put a filter and understand which one's AI, it's random every time. You can tell AI to speak to you in Shakespearean language. So it's not practical to restrict the output of AI and say that I'll be able to tell it's AI. You will if you're the teacher.
Great. Yes, so I think this is something that Andrew also mentioned, that taking inspiration from something that is already available, and this is what I think ChatGPT, getting information that is already available, and then not perhaps producing as intelligent work as humans do. I think this is safe to say that. Anyway, Dr. Glenville, thank you so much. Can you hear us, Dr. Glenville?
I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So coming to your opening statement, Dr. Glanville, what are your views? And of course, because you're associated with International Baccalaureate, what are your views on how do we navigate originality and ownership in this time of generative AI?
So I think I want to start off by saying what a great example the head teacher you cited has put for their students. Because what I think from the IB perspective is artificial intelligence is going to be here. We're going to need to show our students how to navigate it and what ethical use of AI looks like. And that head teacher, by saying, look, I've appointed somebody, I'm using this, and this is how I'm using it, is a great role model for their students on what ethical use looks like. But also, to answer your question, if there's an issue with any of the policies that that school has, the buck will still stop with that head teacher. So whilst it's a tool for supporting the creation of policies, it's not replacing the head teacher there. Within the IB, what we're really trying to do is get students to be transparent when they've used AI. Stop its use, but for them to be clear when it's been there, how it's been used. So within the assessment space, we're asking them to be clear and reference this came from ChatGPT, Bard, whatever else. But also, we're asking our teachers to work with the students, because whilst using ChatGPT and other artificial intelligence to support thinking is a great thing and something we should encourage, what we can't allow it to do is to replace thinking. So a student who uses it to gather ideas, uses it to help refine their essay, uses it to help structure their argument, that's a great ethical use. But the student who just submits something that they got ChatGPT to write last night isn't actually using it ethically. And the teacher will know that. As teachers, you can tell when a student has got somebody else to do their homework for them. And in many ways, this is just an extension of that previous practice of getting somebody else to do the work for them, and they can't do that follow-up. They can't do that explanation of why they came to that conclusion. So that's really at the heart of how we are approaching this, encouraging students to use it in an ethical way, exploring with teachers what ethical looks like, what are the new skills that artificial intelligence brings to the community, and also then those challenging questions of whether is it copyright infringement, whether is it not, how do we reference things properly in the AI world, and also issues like where does imitation come from? If you're imitating somebody, is that the same as copying somebody? So there's a lot of really exciting opportunities here. The biggest opportunity for everybody, though, is, as one of my fellow panelists said, removing barriers. As a young man, I really know that the difference it made when I was allowed to use a calculator to do maths, it suddenly removed that barrier of me being very poor at arithmetic and actually allowed me to go on and study a PhD in mathematics. I think the same opportunity is here. It's going to let students who struggle to communicate, whether it is in any particular language or is it between languages, to show the ideas they've got, and then it is their ideas being communicated. That's got to be a good thing. But in the assessment space, how do we reward that? How do we balance between being able to make a coherent argument that perhaps ChatGPT can help with, and how we get those ideas that were behind that argument, which is what we really should value in the student.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Glanville. And I could see there was a teacher, mathematics teacher, talking about how if you know your students, you would exactly know whether their produced work is by ChatGPT or their own ideas, because of course you know the text and you know. So I'm going to spin that question back at you, Mr. Andrew, in terms of Oxford, knowing that there is a potential with AI of students using that for their assignments, even potentially for their assessment prep. What is Oxford thinking? What is there any policy that you feel is going to be in place in the future to combat that? Because IB has a slightly different structure. It is a combination of summative and formative. However, with Oxford, of course, it's the end of year exam. So the examiner, when they're looking at the answer sheet, they are not familiar with the student. So how would they know whether or not it is the original work? Is there anything that Oxford is thinking about?
Well, I think it highlights the difference and the importance to some extent of summative and formative tools and how they need to be treated differently. Most of our assessments are summative, but you're right, not all. And we do have project-based qualifications as well, which are extremely popular. I think it's a challenge. I think you can. I certainly agree with Matthew that we have to make sure that where AI is used, it needs to be acknowledged. That's very important. There are also lots of tools that AI can help us actually to detect when there is malpractice going on, which we use. But I think it's also a challenge for us that may lead to us thinking in a different way in the future. And I'm certainly not saying this is about to happen, but we all know, and I think we've seen it today with the experience when you speak to AI, it doesn't necessarily respond exactly as you might want it to, and it's easy to tell straight away whether when you talk to someone whether they know what they're talking about or not. So there is discussion going on about whether oral exams, which are still used quite widely in some parts of the world, might be a good way of bringing back that kind of assessment. From a sort of an assessment organization, that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do because it can be very labor intensive, very difficult to implement. But it's certainly true that in a very short space of time, if you have a doubt about whether a student has created a piece of work, if you ask them a question about it, you will know almost immediately, just as a teacher will, whether or not they know what they're talking about, and that will be a hint as to whether they produced it or not. So I kind of agree with with what's been said before. We should definitely embrace AI. We should encourage students to use it, but to use it ethically in the right way and acknowledge when they're doing so. And I think that's the way we will all learn and we will all improve as we go.
Yes, I do agree. Yes, and I think that would be great if we could incorporate the oral exam or assessment, because again, you can really cross-check whether it's students' own thinking, their work. Excellent. So, sir, coming to you, Mr. Wasim Ajmal Chaudhry, in terms of policy, we talked about Oxford thinking about certain policies. Do you think, or do you have any plan of action for the public sector in the assessment system where AI could play a role? I know we are sort of further away from the detection part. At the moment, we are only at the stage where students, whether or not they will have access to AI. But do you think the government is thinking of a policy where, one, there is going to be access for our students to have to use at least generative AI, or then later on any academic honesty or something on the lines of that?
So far, what we have started looking into this aspect is that start using this tool for the federal board officials themselves. The chairman of the federal board is sitting here. We have engaged an AI firm that how do we actually translate this subjective way of marking the question papers into a kind of objectively evaluated with the help of an AI tool. So that work has already started, and we would be using that kind of technology support very soon. So, as far as the students are concerned, that how do we encourage students? So far, as I had already discussed, that for me, the adoption of technology in the public sector is a kind of, mechanism whereby we see it in terms of costs. For example, the private schools or their students can be wealthy or can have resources to adopt those kinds of tools very early on. But for the public sector, who come from kind of socioeconomic background, where and also the public schools who don't have these kinds of infrastructure, so for them it's a intensive thing. So I was very intrigued to listen when Moni said that for entrepreneurship, it has become a kind of cost effective. But as far as delivery of education systems is concerned, for us, technology is quite has actually increased the the inequities, what we call the digital divide. So the wealthy and the influential families and school systems can adopt it early on. So for us, it's a challenge in terms of for the kids, and also because for the public, assuming the responsibility of a kid, just like the parents have quite that kind of responsibility for their kids in home, exposing them to a situation which might not be their age appropriate kind of intervention, or when I think of something which is not owned by anyone, the kind of just think of a textbook which is not written by anyone. It's just produced by maybe a kind of AI aided support. So whom do we hold accountable for that? So it's really a question that at this stage I think the governments are trying to see as a whole and get data that what is going on in this field and how careful we should be to adopt these kinds of strategies. For example, in terms of UNESCO, which is a kind of a policy forum for the governments, they have produced certain reports and advised the governments to how do they actually embrace it, but as well as caution it in terms of coming up with some kind of policy regulations first, and then only allow it for the kids to start using it.
Great. So, I'm glad, and I'm sure the audience and everyone else is that there is a lot of discussion already happening, a lot of data being collected. Just on a personal note, sir, have you ever used ChatGPT to produce something?
Yeah, I've been using it for, just Matthew said that oral as well as, exams. So we often use it when we evaluate a CV, and then we call him
Okay.
for the interview and see what is the characteristics which he have, written for himself, that in terms of experience, in terms of attributes of qualifications. But once you actually, interview him, it comes out a different person. So is the case, in many cases whereby, this chat GPT, started. So we started asking him many questions. They are sometimes interesting, but
Yes.
sometimes, not relevant for most of our decision
So I
making.
think why I asked is, one, we all use it, I use it a lot. But when you use it consistently, you sort of get to know a pattern, how the kind of text it produces, and you sort of see that pattern, and then you are able to differentiate between human produced text and AI produced text. So, Monis, I'll sort of throw the same question at you. Have you used ChatGPT, Bard, and for what purposes, if you
Yeah,
may want to share?
I use ChatGPT. I use OpenAI's APIs. I'm a software guy, so we program. We don't type manually. We have our programs use AI and do magical things, and we've managed to do amazing things with it. And one of the things that we'll be launching soon will be interesting for you. You basically upload CVs, and it's going to read through there and get all the skills out. Create a dynamic assessment test based on your job description. These are programs talking to AI, and we're launching this next week, but it's very easy to do. So a few things I want to say. One is that this whole AI has become very, very accessible. AI used to be very expensive. You had to hire PhDs to do ML and, all these sort of models, and a team of 6, 8 people spend 1 year of work, and the results weren't that good. Now, my 15-year-old son, who's a Python programmer, he's learned very quickly. Any child can learn it. Uh, and he's writing APIs to do these things. And now it speaks Urdu, so you can talk to it in Urdu. So I think actually it's going to be a revolution for the have-nots. I think AI can be a revolution for the have-nots. And statistically, we've seen that rich parents, their children perform in a better way on statistical exams. I mean, there's lots of numbers around this, but if you're rich, your child has a higher chance of doing well as compared to a poor child. And I think with the advent of AI and how easily accessible it is, any of you could connect to AI in a matter of half an hour, and you don't need software programmers, and it's become more accessible. The thing that I think is important to say is, in the startup world, we say, don't run to where the ball is, run to where the ball is going. And AI is evolving so quickly. These models are going from 5 billion parameters to 10 billion to 100 billion to trillions of parameters. Compute power that's needed, the hardware chips that allow it to crunch this information, is growing equally fast. And so right now, to create policies based on what we're seeing with AI is actually futile, because things are moving so fast that the moment you create some structure on, well, we should be doing this and this with AI, next 2-3 months things are going to change again. So why not run to where the ball is going to go? And they're great educators in this room, and this is a historical inflection point. Things are changing quickly. There used to be a time where you were not allowed to take a calculator into an exam, right? And now you can. And because the concept behind that is what you really need to know. And I think in the same way, teaching, the ability to grade an essay based on the vocabulary used, the spelling mistakes, the grammar, all of these skills, I think they're going to be commoditized. And the assumption should be that everybody is going to use AI or chat GPT, not, did you use it or not? I think we have to preempt that and assume it's going to be used. So how do I test this person? What are the essential skills of tomorrow? And I think this is something we have to think about. And the answer isn't available today because AI is changing so quickly.
Yes.
But I think AI has a tremendous impact on your curriculums that need to be quickly revamped. And we don't really know, but it's essential to do that, because maybe many of the skills that we're teaching are not skills that will be important in the future, and we're penalizing our students to conform to the past.
Yes. No, I do agree. It is changing. And I would like to now try out if Nadia is still awake and with us, and ask her. There is a sort of a request from the audience if I could ask Nadia a question, and then Dr. Glanville, I'll of course come back to you. Let's give it a try. If a student uses artificial intelligence to finish his homework, who will be the owner of that homework? Nadia, please don't disappoint us. So as you can see, generative AI takes longer to process information, looks through the database, and our human panelists, of course, were very prompt with their ideas. So I think we need a round of applause for that. So Nadia doesn't want to talk to us. That is fine. So Dr. Glanville, coming back to you, we did talk about access in the Pakistani context. With IB and generally globally as well, I'm not sure if everyone has access to generative AI. Not a lot of parents would like their children to use it. How do you bring that equity in terms of our assessment system for students who do not have access to AI to produce better work or refine their work, if I would sort of put it that way, and those who don't? Or do you think it's even relevant or important in this day and age?
It is definitely important.
The student will still be the owner of the homework, as they are the one who used AI as a tool to assist them.
Oh, thank you, Nadia. You were late, but at least, but I mean, that's not very nice to interrupt Dr. Glanville. But thank you for your response. Here you go, Matthew. Let's please hear it from you.
Cool. As I said, yes, inequality is really important, and we need to understand what the different elements of that inequality are. As previous speakers said, that sort of social inequality is known to have a big effect. And I personally wonder how much the digital is a subset, or inequality is a subset of that, and which is the one we need to address first. In order to address the key question you asked is, how do we stop students being disadvantaged? It's really about valuing what the student does, not what the AI does. So if you're going to give lots of marks for beautifully written or correct spelling or correct grammar or any of that sort of area, which AI and indeed lots of existing tools can help with already, then that's going to create that disadvantage. If you're going to focus on some of the higher order thinking skills, the way in which the student has developed the thinking, then you're not giving that same level of ability for students to get marks for what the artificial intelligence has done for them. So we really need to focus on letting the student show what they've done, letting the student think about things and bringing it to the level beyond what the AI is doing. Having said that, there's a real challenge for us about how over the next 3 to 4 months, 3 to 4 years, artificial intelligence is going to develop and whether it's going to get better at making those links. And what does that mean for the students who aren't yet at the level of being able to do that bringing together of arguments? How are we going to make sure that certain students aren't left behind because the skill sets that they've practiced in the past are the ones that artificial intelligence can do for them in the future? And again, I think that's really about inquiry-based education. It's about having the student lead how they think about stuff. With the introduction of the internet and Google and Wikipedia, there was this fear that suddenly facts could be easily grabbed off the internet. And in today's world, we've more or less accepted that if you want to know a fact, you Google it. You then need the skill set to understand whether you've got a reliable source for that information or not, because some sites on the website are pretty reliable. Others are very, very biased, which is, of course, why artificial intelligence has bias built into it. And these are the skills that we need our students to have, that critical thinking skill. And it goes beyond just the AI world, it goes into all the other arenas where students think about what's said to them critically and draw their own conclusions about it based on what they value and what they don't value, as opposed to just accepting the information. So really, it's about, as previous speaker said, looking ahead. What are the skills we need for the future? And then how do we embed those in the classroom now? And we've seen that gradual change over the past 10, 20, 30 years with the introduction of more access to knowledge, more access to what's available on the internet, and that digital divide there. But we still need to do more, because the next level's happening with artificial intelligence. It's making it even easier to produce work that in the past had to be a copy and paste job from students who then had to craft it together, whereas now the technology will make it look as good as a human-produced essay, a human-produced piece of work. I would also just like to say, you said earlier that you can tell the kind of style. I think that A, AI will get better at avoiding that, and B, students will become very, very good at avoiding that kind of language, so it's not easy just to look and say, yeah, well, that was produced by artificial intelligence. But what they won't be able to do is understand it if they haven't engaged with it properly and don't have the understanding behind it when you question them. So that sort of interactive assessment, where you ask a follow-up question, whether that's oral, digital, or whatever other means, is really the way forward.
Great. No, I mean, that is of course helpful, and like you said, AI is improving very rapidly. So I know in the audience we have more parents and teachers than students. I was going to ask you guys for a piece of advice for keeping originality and ownership, but do we have any advice for our audience who are mainly parents or teachers? Because AI is here to stay. Students will use it for their assessments, for their homework. It will impact original work. It will impact ownership. So, is there any advice, last piece of advice from all of you, one by one, for the audience, from you with your experience and expertise in the educational field? Andrew, let's start from you.
Okay, two pieces of advice I would say. First is don't try to ban things. Don't try to stop students from using things. Encourage them to do it in the right way. And the second thing I would say, as teachers and parents, is ask your students lots of questions, because that's the way you will check whether they're learning and whether they know about things. And ask and encourage them to ask questions as well. And never take things at face value. Always think about, is this true? Where does it come from? How do I know? So ask questions.
Great. No, thank you so much. That's extremely helpful. So more human interaction to counter AI, I would say. I think that's what I get from your response. Ji sir, any advice for the audience from you? Of course, your context is more local, so it would be valuable for us.
Of course, it's more or less same advice. We all want to make sure that our kids learn 21st century skills, including all kinds of digital skills. But simultaneously, we want to actually reduce their time of screen, and that is where what is very important. That in the context of AI, it has to be seen whether the process of knowledge creation should not be somehow, kind of devoid of the human interaction. So that is an area where the parents, the teachers have to be cognizant of the fact that their learner, the child, doesn't get his entire worldview from AI or algorithms or a kind of data sets which are quite detached from reality sometimes, and particularly in our societies where all these technology sets or the data might have a lot of biases, might have a lot of influence in a manner that the kids can actually go astray, defeating the overall purpose of the society and the education system.
Great. So again, thank you so much. That is wonderful exercise, advice. Sorry, Monis. The same question with a twist. Because your work with digital entrepreneurs, anything for them specifically? Because why I ask for that advice, because there is a lot of investment involved with entrepreneurship. So we really need to see where to put that money, which is extremely important as well. So in light of that, what would be your advice for us and for students, the new generation?
The, first of all, I again want to use the analogy of the calculator. And I want to talk about children and then as they grow up, because I think it varies by age group. It's not a broad brush stroke. You definitely need children to develop these foundational skills, being able to add and to multiply and learn the tables and all of that. But then after a certain age, you're like, okay, now they can start to use calculators. And I think that age has come down. And what we find is our children actually end up learning faster when they have these calculators. Example of my son, we got him a very nice one, graphical, and he kept entering equations and watching them. And he learned so much by just interactively playing with this tool and technology. It was the right time to give it to him because foundation was strong. If we had been using a calculator since grade 2, then he would be lacking very important foundational skills. AI is the same way. I think, at the right age, we need to make sure the children learn these foundational skills without the computer. But once they're past that age, we need to encourage them to use these tools because their ability to get proficiency on these tools is going to impact how well they do. There are professions today, a new profession, it came out in the last year, called a prompt engineer. There are people paid money to write prompts for AI engines to get the right things back. This is a new skill. So these skills are going to be very, very important. So again, going back to startups and entrepreneurs, since they have presumably already acquired the foundational skills, adding AI layers to everything and anything is creating a disruption. You name the vertical, people now doing the exact same thing that had been done for many years by putting an AI layer, which is actually very easy, surprisingly easy to build, allows them to disrupt an old player because they've just added a simple AI layer. They're not doing a lot of the work themselves. So AI is a big, great equalizer. And I think we'll realize this. AI is seen very advanced technology that's not accessible. But the irony is that AI actually is an equalizer. Now, 80% of adults in this country have smartphones. I have a cook. His son is about the age of my son. They're not going to the same schools, but he's educating them. My children's English is much better. But it doesn't really matter now because this child on his smartphone, his dad's smartphone, can use ChatGPT and generate beautiful content. And that is really the test of the human intellect as opposed to this biased background of how well he was able to speak English because we could afford that. So again, I just want to say it's a great equalizer. It's a great opportunity for Pakistan, especially the bottom of the pyramid, the masses in Pakistan who need it most. It makes education accessible to them, especially as we localize these things. So we should embrace it.
We should embrace it, certainly, certainly. Using our own intelligence, not let artificial intelligence overtake that, but certainly use it intelligently. So, Dr. Matthew, any last pieces of advice from you? Again, keeping in view the assessment and originality and the danger.
We know students, young people pick up technology quicker than some of us slightly older gentlemen and ladies. So really learn with your students and your children, and indeed learn from your students and your children. And by engaging with them in how it's used, you'll then be able to give them the sort of the ethical framework which they can then take forward and use in other ways. To go full circle back to where I started this, as parents, as teachers, you are role models for your students. So if they see you using artificial intelligence in certain ways, they will think that that's the right way to use it. So let's make sure that we, A, don't hide from it, we do embrace it, and also we use it in the way that we would like our young people to use it.
Great, thank you so much. And I think that is valuable. Now we have just a couple of minutes for questions from the audience. Ms. Hina, can we have the other question that we had earlier? So I think specifically, Monas, this is for you. So when you said that we need to see where the ball rolling to, should it not be now critical to test students on how well they can build AI to pave their way to the future jobs?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a new sort of competency that we're struggling with, but there's no doubt that being able to navigate AI efficiently is going to be a huge edge. And maybe this is the way to counter this sort of plagiarism problem. It used to be the case that our children would go to the internet and Google something, and they would do a cut and paste, and we could tell that it's plagiarized. And due to the random nature of AI, it's impossible to do it. You can make AI write in any style. I can tell AI to put 20 E's in the answer. That's my footprint, right? So yes, absolutely, we need to be teaching our children to be using this, and I think it's a necessity.
Something that is unavoidable as well.
Yes.
Something that is unavoidable. Any other questions from the audience? I think we have talked about that already, but let's see what are the biggest dangers we face for our students with the increasing use of AI. Andrew, would you like to take that, and then I'll move to Mr. Chaudhary.
Maybe two quick thoughts. One of the biggest dangers, I think, with technology is that rather than enhancing learning, there is a risk that it can replace learning, and that's absolutely what we need to avoid. So I think, Monty's point about foundational skills is really critical. And just one more thing, and it's another piece of advice that may sound a bit counterintuitive here, is sometimes just get out and enjoy yourselves without any technology and any screens, because it's a great world out there that we can all learn from.
Sir, would you agree with that in terms of, you said that earlier that we need to also sort of off-screen time is more important. In terms of, I'll have the next question for you now that we have it. Thank you so much, Ms. Hina. When we say that AI is usually moderated by the Western world, what should be our role as a nation in terms of information input? How can we use it as an advantage for Pakistan? I think that would be a very good last question for you.
Not only very good question, rather very difficult question.
Difficult as well, yes.
In fact, this is not a question of whether to use it or not use it. It's not an either or. I tend to agree with all the panelists that this is a necessity. We have to adopt it. And the only thing is that we have to be, conscious of the fact. I say this, that there was a time that knowledge was being transferred from the east towards the west. We all know, from India or Andalusia to the west. And if the flow is from west to east, there would be issues. For example, even in terms of copyrights. When we transferred knowledge, we didn't ask for any copyright. So once now it is coming from west to east, there are licenses, there are issues of copyright. Similarly, when we say that it might be costly, because at the moment, AI tools are accessible to everyone. But what if, it starts happening that, okay, you can access to that level, but if you want to go beyond that, then you have to pay for that. So, that kind of issues would obviously create a divide whereby have-nots might be left behind on that. The role of the government for the Pakistan would be that we would also use the same tool, AI tool, to guard us against those kinds of biases or those kinds of dangers which could inflict upon the education system's overall objectives and purposes for us. So we also have to use the same tools. There's no way out.
No, thank you so much. And I think how I would conclude that, and I'm sure Matthew sitting there, you would agree with us as well, as concluding remarks, that I think in the age of AI and what you see on the stage, a very good balance of East and West working together. I think we are beyond that. There is no such thing as East or West. These are ideas, human. We live in a global world. And this is what you saw in terms of our panel discussion today. The time is up. Thank you so much to our panelists, our audience, for participating in SOT 16. We would like to thank you. Thanks our sponsor, Google for Education. And thank you so much for all your input. It was a wonderful, wonderful discussion, and I'm sure the audience is taking a few pieces of advice with them. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Matthew.
That was a wonderful and a very insightful session. Thank you very much, Ms. Kamal Malik. Respected audience, I hope you enjoyed it. Please share your feedback using the mobile app. Thank you.